Okay, good afternoon everyone. Thanks for everybody's attendance. It's always a very hard gig being the last speaker on the last day and the final session. So thank you all for staying awake and thank you all for attending this afternoon. So I'll basically kick off the first part of the talk. I'll go through the pre-awarding of the waste contract, and then Rebecca will talk about the experience post-awarding the contract. So the Central Coast region is an area between Sydney and Newcastle in New South Wales. It's got a population of about 330,000. It's projected to grow to about 415,000 by the year 2036. So in terms of the area, it became Central Coast Council on the 12th of May 2016. So in terms of staff, we had about 2,350 staff. Of that, about 50 of those in the waste services section. So the waste services section looks after waste services and also waste facilities. So we have 3 licensed landfills, one in the south, Woywer landfill, just north of that, Kincumber landfill, and also the far north, Buttondry landfill. We also inherited 15 closed landfill sites as well. Amalgamations aren't exactly new to the Central Coast region. Back in the early 1940s, a number of areas within the Central Coast at that time were merged to form the Gosford and Wyong councils. Amalgamation has also been an issue faced not only by Central Coast councils but also a number of other councils, and I'll explain a little bit later on when putting this waste contract together, speaking to a lot of other councils at that time, that there was a lot of uncertainty. At the moment, we have been a merged council for quite some time, but we're still going through a number of issues. We're going through issues in terms of finance, rates, fees and charges, org structures, and also dealing with waste services contract. So, in terms of waste services, how we're actually viewed within the community. Well, we had a pretty good standing within the community. So, various community satisfaction surveys were held from 2014 through to 2016, and the waste services was continually viewed as highly successful, as a service that the community could trust, and it was delivering to their needs. So much so in 2014, a survey was done with a waste services contract, and the delivery of that contract was outmarking other council services, not surprisingly roads, water, and also playgrounds. We have a very passionate and engaged community where they've been involved in e-waste collections, household chemical collections, public place recycling, Clean Up Australia Day, Second-Hand Saturday, and the Garage Sale Trail. So we were pretty confident that when we were moving on to our next stage of community consultation, that we would be viewed fairly highly. So we conducted the community consultation between February and April 2016. We did it by a number of ways: telephone interviews, online questionnaires, and also some focus groups. I must say the most rewarding part of that community consultation was the focus group sessions. The focus group sessions were run by an independent organisation specialising in community consultation, where council were just an independent observer. That was a very frustrating thing at sometimes, but a very rewarding thing from sometimes, where we didn't really have any input to the conversation. Those people who were involved in the community consultation for focus groups were ones that perhaps lived next door to a landfill, lived next door to a MRF, were a nurse, were a teacher, and that was a really rewarding process. But I just wanted to focus on a couple of key issues. Not surprisingly, we wanted some resolution for our bulk waste collection service, which we believed was a gold-plated service. So our service consisted of 3-bin system, waste, recycling, garden organics, a litter collection, but also a bulk waste collection service. So this slide basically just demonstrates that the community wanted the status quo to remain for the next domestic waste contract. We provided a number of options to the focus groups, having no bulk waste collections, to having a voucher system, to having 2 or 3 bulk waste collections, and also having the current on-call collection service, which was overwhelmingly preferred. Not really unsurprising. A couple of comments just thrown in there, just to say, you know, I use the bulk waste collection service or I don't use the bulk waste collection service. One of the main issues was that though everyone had an opinion, which was great. Rightly or wrongly, everyone had an opinion on the service. So a couple of key findings from our community consultation. As I said before, bulk waste collection, everybody wanted to stay with the same service. A larger recycling bin. Interestingly, when we had that discussion, CDS wasn't on the radar. So they wanted flexibility to have a larger recycling bin. We also talked about FOGO. That was the in thing at the time. And not unsurprisingly, there was a mixed reaction to that. And that's particularly around the servicing of the waste bin, going from a weekly collection to a fortnightly collection. So finally, we went out to market. We went out to market on the 24th of April 2017 after 2 years developing the contract. We had a number of bumps along the way. A number of bumps were certainly well publicised in the media. A number of those bumps included contractor industrial issues, which no doubt you may have heard about, and we had the unprecedented step of the union becoming heavily involved. We had the Premier's department involved. We also had our administrator involved. So the end result of that was there was a set price put in the contract for an hourly rate of the workers. Pretty much an unprecedented step within the contract. And throughout that period as well, we also had a number of stop working episodes. So the community satisfaction was starting to wane somewhat. A couple other things. In the development of the waste contract, we explored the issue of day labour. Quite an extensive report was put together about the reasons for and against putting day labour, and it was decided not to include that in the waste contract. Contract being too large, the procurement value was quite large, and it really wasn't council's core business. I'll just touch on one thing very briefly. We initially had recycling processing in the original tender. We decided to pull that at the last minute due to the volatility within the recycling market. As it turns out, we're out to market as we speak at the moment for recycling processing. I won't dwell on this. It's pretty much stock standard stuff within the council objectives, but at the end of the day, we basically wanted a best practice waste management service for the best possible value for the community. A couple of key points I just want to focus on. We decided to update the 120 litre bins in the former Gosford LGA to align it to the former Wyong Council to a 140 litre bin. We also put 2 options for the bulk waste collection, 6 collections and also 4 plus 2 vouchers. The last 3 are pretty important ones. We wanted the option for the contractor to have total control to collect the illegal dumped material. Previously we wanted council, or we had council officers collecting that, which was totally inefficient. You know, you basically want something collected that day and they basically collected it when they felt like it. So we wanted some provisions within the contract to have a bit more control. The next point, we had a trial in the former Gosford area of having some bin blitz officers, some resource recovery officers, and their role was to look at the number of bins being paid for and also the number of bins not being paid for. And this is probably subject to another speech for another day, but just to give you an insight, the number of bins not being paid for in residential areas was about 10-15%. But then commercial, on the other hand, it's about 80 to 90%. So it really opened your eyes up. We needed someone on the ground to go out and inspect those bins to say, well, you're not paying for them, take them back. So we've had some exceptional results previously, so we wanted that embedded in the contract. And also that role is a good linkage between the waste education officer and also the drivers. Lastly, the learnings from the April 2016 storm that hit the Central Coast region, we really wanted the ability to turn off the domestic waste contract to really focus on the cleaning up of waste materials. Just for example, the Central Coast region has been hit by 16 natural disasters over the past 12 years. So placing us in the top 10 New South Wales LGAs for state government declared natural disasters. So we wanted the ability to stop bulk waste collections, to stop green waste collection, and just focus on getting the streets clean. So the timetable. Very, 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 very tight timetables when you start looking at when the contract was put out for tender, when it closed, and also when it started. Only about 5 months, 5.5 months between when it was awarded to when it started. All contractors at the pre-tender meeting were asked if that time was achievable. Were we being optimistic? Were we being ridiculous? Because at the same time there was a number of other major contracts out of that time, namely Brisbane. So as part of the delivery of the commencement of the contract, the successful contractor had to provide new trucks, about 70 of them, staff, officers, technology, so it was a big, big ask for a pretty big and complex contract. So we received about 16 submissions, both conforming and non-conforming. It was very highly contested. Some exceptional tenders were put forward. The whole process was overseen by our probity, was overseen by an independent probity officer with input from internal and external finance, legal and waste officers as well, and also members of the ELT. So the contract was awarded to Cleanaway based on their exceptional service capabilities, experience, technology, staffing, and also ability to engage local drivers. So I'll just hand over to Rebecca, who can talk about the pre-contract.
Thanks, James. Don't worry, everyone. I'm going to try and make up some time because I know we're running very behind and everyone's in a hurry. One of the things that was quite unusual about this contract, especially because it was such a condensed time frame, was that we had really exceptional pre-contract collaboration, so working together between Council and Cleanaway. We had weekly meetings, they were in person, there were all sorts of stakeholders there, and I really think that that helped us get across all of the issues as quickly and efficiently as possible. I was going to show a beautiful video, but I'm not going to. If you're interested in looking at the video, it's actually on the One Coast page, One Coast Council page, and also on One Coast Facebook. So this was actually made as part of our communication with our residents to try and reassure them that everything was under control for the new contract. Oh, it started by itself. Here we go. All right, so challenges. We've talked a little bit about these already. Very tight time frame. Less than 6 months from award to commencement. It's already been pointed out that getting vehicles in that space of time is really difficult. We needed to source 68 new vehicles for this contract. We had the trucks being delivered right up until commencement. They also additionally needed to be customised, have the livery applied, all of that sort of stuff. You can see one of our beautiful recycling trucks there. We also had a little bit of a hiccup with that as well, in that the Roads and Maritime Service changed their registration heavy vehicle inspection process, which blew out the timeline a little bit, but we still got there in the end, which is the main thing. The depot site was another challenge, so Cleanaway was taking over from the existing contractor, which meant that all the preparation had to be done off-site. So we literally did not get access to the depot until the day before the new contract was due to start, which was a Thursday. So a little bit unusual there. It was the 1st of February, that happened to fall on a Thursday. So you can imagine trying to get everything in overnight was a real challenge. We also were taking on a lot of the incumbent staff, so getting them across from Remondis to Cleanaway overnight was a real challenge as well, and lots of them actually had to come in during the holiday period in January to do their staff training. We put together a resident communication plan to make sure that everybody was across what was happening. As James mentioned, there'd been lots of prior issues with service stoppages and things like that. So we really wanted to make sure that the residents were informed, happy and confident. We came up with some really clear key messages and a variety of communication channels to make sure that nobody was missed. Central Coast has got a large proportion of elderly residents and also a large proportion of holiday homes, so we needed to make sure we got across to everybody. So key messages were, there will be no major changes for most residents. It was actually less than 5% of the residents that were going to have a major day change. The households with a day change will be notified. They were notified in a couple of different ways, and the website, the One Coast website that everyone had been used to using, would remain the same as with the phone number, and that's one of the newspaper ads we took out. Communication channels were varied. As I mentioned, we wanted to make sure we had the best possible reach, so online, that's where we had that video, the One Coast website, social media, council Facebook pages, all of that, print media and newspapers, and community newsletters, which are quite widely read. Direct to residents in letters and rates notice flyers, and through the community as well, so particularly in suburbs that were experiencing a major change, we used VMS signs and pop-up information stalls like the one you see there. Generally, the response leading up to the change was pretty positive, so when we spoke to residents at the pop-up stalls, they felt pretty confident with the changes. They knew what it was going to mean for their household. They just wanted to check that their days weren't changing, but they were confident once they knew what was going on that it was all going to be okay. I really think working together in this way prior to the contract helped with the team attitude between Cleanaway and Council, and also brought up some of the pinch points. So we actually had a few data issues that came up in the pre-process that would have caused us problems at the beginning if we hadn't found them. So there were some complications, quite a lot of complications in the end. We had some unavoidable issues due to the tight time frame. Setting up a call centre was really difficult. Getting the website transitioned over was also really difficult, and that blew out and it wasn't ready on day one, which caused some complications and some confusion for residents. We had some legacy issues, so the outgoing contractor had had some service problems with trying to get cleanups and things collected, as quite frequently happens at the end of a contract, and a number of those weren't completed by our start date. So, and the waters were really muddied as well, in that residents couldn't tell who was responsible for the delays, and they were just generally confused and a bit bewildered, but it was sorted out fairly quickly. We also had to deal with that negative hangover because there had been the service complications in the weeks leading up to the new contract, and the industrial issues that James had mentioned before, and we did have some problems with the database, additional problems with rates and property databases being conflicting, and also the amalgamation having two completely separate council databases being rolled into one. So, contract startup stats. Now, as you can imagine with all of those complications, we're all feeling pretty stressed in the first few weeks of the new contract, but the main indicator that we've decided to look at is, were the bins being collected? And they were, which is great. So we actually had a really, really low misservice rate. It was 0.15% of the total, 1,087,298 services. So of those, only 0.15% missed services in that first month of February. And we've been continuing to improve since then, and the numbers keep on going down for missed services, and then services are increasing. So, learnings. Never start a new contract on a Thursday. You'd think that this was a little bit obvious, but it is something that most people involved have said that they will never do again. It was really, really tricky, and it meant a lot of people, including the regional manager, were connecting cables in the call centre at 3 a.m. on Thursday morning to try and get everything sorted in time. Technology, test and test again. We had some great technology in the vehicles. We hadn't had time necessarily to get everyone 100% accustomed to it, so we had to have backup plans in play. We also had issues with testing for the website. If we'd had more time, we hopefully would have been able to sort through some of those, which brings me to the next one, the transition time. 5 months is really tight. We did it, but it was a combination of luck and quick thinking a lot of the time to get that through, especially with the situation, an external situation like the RMS changes. A couple more months would have been great, and expect the unexpected. Once again, things are always going to go wrong. So it's best to have contingency built in at the beginning, and that understanding of, okay, it is not 100% going to go smoothly. What are we going to do if things go wrong? So what's next? We're taking a lot of the learnings from the communication around the new contract to a project which is actually starting today. So the bin changeover that James mentioned, we've got the former Gosford LGA all changing from 120 litre bins to 140 litre bins to make it uniform across the LGA. 58,000 bins getting delivered from today for 10 weeks. So we actually based the communication plan for this rollout on the learnings that we'd had with the new contract commencement, and because, you know, I guess capitalising on the things that worked really well and then not worrying so much about the things that weren't relevant. And that's it, and I've made up pretty much. We're only 5 minutes later. So thank you so much, everybody.